Hello, our story today is The Weakness of the World's Strongest Man, and is based on Judges chapters 13 through 16. When the writer of Hebrews listed the Old Testament heroes of faith, he included Samson, Hebrews 11:32. We could be tempted to ask, really? Samson's story, recorded in Judges 13 to 16, reads like a story of a narcissistic superhero whose pride destroys him in the end. But God wanted Samson included in the list because his example teaches us crucial lessons about faith. To explore these, let's imagine two of Samson's brothers. I've given them the fictitious names of Abijah and Nadar on their way to collect Samson's body in Gaza, Judges 16:31. As they reflect on all that went wrong in Samson's life, we can reflect on all that God did right in the greater storyline of faith. The two brothers said nothing for a long time after the ruins of Dagon's temple came into view. It lay on the ground like a torn carcass, and those still living were crawling through the debris, extracting the dead. They had come to retrieve their oldest brother Samson, whose broken body still lay somewhere in the rubble. No Philistine had dared touch the cursed corpse of the man who with the strength of a god had brought the temple crashing down, taking more than 1,000 of his mockers with him into the dark land. When the brothers neared the ruins, they stopped to rest and to muster some courage. Removing the body would be risking violent retribution from grieving Philistines. Nadar, the youngest of the two, broke the silence. "Did you ever think it would end like this?" Abijah, 7 years older, gulped down some water and handed the skin to Nadar. He answered, "I used to think he was invincible. I can still see him describing how we killed the lion barehanded. I was 15 and almost worshipped him. He was so strong, so fearless, and God was with him. This," he said, nodding to the wreckage, "would have been inconceivable to me back then. Samson dying blind in the house of Dagon. But why did God let this happen?" "Well, I'm sure the Almighty has reasons that I'll never know," Abijah replied. "But I think we need to be careful where we lay the blame. It wasn't God who was unfaithful." "But I don't get it," Nadar said. "How can an angel foretell his birth? And how can God use him so powerfully just to have his legacy collapse like this in the end?" Abijah squinted towards the ruins. "It's probably too early to call this the end. God will use Samson's story more than we think, but our brother's life collapsed under the weight of his pride. God gave him an amazing gift, but he let the gift go to his head. I think he saw it as God's personal endorsement to him. He assumed God would keep blessing him, even though one by one he broke every Nazirite vow, Judges 13:7. Looking back at Nadar, he said, "God may be slow to anger," Exodus 34:6, "but it's a dangerous thing to mistake God's patience with sin as a license to sin." "But why did God keep blessing him when Samson was faithless?" asked Nadar. "Well, I wouldn't say he was faithless," Abijah responded. "You can exercise faith while being unfaithful. Samson knew his strength came from God. He believed the angel's prophecy and believed that God would bless his gift of strength when Samson needed it. In that sense, every mighty act our brother ever did was by faith, and God used him." "So by unfaithful, you mean what?" asked Nadar. "I mean that Samson believed God would be faithful to his word, but Samson didn't believe he needed to be faithful to God's word. He trusted God to empower his gifting, but he didn't trust God to satisfy his appetites. So he disobeyed God and indulged sin. He was already blind when the Philistines finally got to him." "I still don't understand why God kept blessing him when he was sinning," persisted Nadar. Abijah answered, "Well, if by blessing you mean Samson's strength, it was because God was being faithful to his word. He promised he would use Samson to deliver Israel from Philistine, Judges 13:5. And he faithfully kept that promise, even when Samson disobeyed him. And God was amazingly patient with him. He gave him so many chances, but Samson ignored them. And when he finally broke the last vow, God's patience was over. The tragedy of our brother's life is that he ended up thinking more highly of himself than of God. Abijah looked back toward the temple remains. To me, that shattered temple is a monument to what happens when we are unfaithful with God's gifts. Samson is an unnerving hero of faith. He did exercise faith, but he was unfaithful to most important things, the love of God that's revealed in obedience. John 14:15. If we have great faith but not love, we are nothing. 1 Corinthians 13:2. God gives each of us gifts according to the grace given us. Romans 12:6. They are grace gifts, undeserved, and they are for the common good. 1 Corinthians 12:7. They're about God's greatness, not ours. They should keep us humble. Romans 12:3. Especially when we remember that someday we will stand before Jesus having done mighty works, and God will say, I never knew you. Matthew 7:23. So let Samson's faith soberly remind us that our talents or spiritual gifts are not God's endorsement to us. Faithful obedience is better than impressive giftedness, and that faith must work through love. Galatians 5:6. And thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day.